All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Guru. Jai Jai Shri Guru. Says, Shri Guru. Subhadramaya ki jai, Shri Guru ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Chapraishu Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhagavati Nashiki. We continue reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 2. Text 22. It's in prose, so I will just read it through. Agnitro Raja Tripta Kamanam Apsarasam Ivanudinam Adi Manyamanas Tasya Salokatam Shrutibir Avarunda Yatra Pitaro Madayante. Christian, how do you read this text? Just like this, or? You don't? Word for word translation. Agnidraha Agnitra Raja the king Atriptaha not satisfied Kamana with sense gratification Apsarasam the celestial women the celestial woman Purvachitti Eva certainly Anudinam day after day Adhi exceedingly Manyamanaha thinking of Tasyaha of her Salokatam promotion to the same planet Shrutibihi by the Vedas Avarundha God Yatra where Pitraha the forefathers Madayante take pleasure. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. After Purvachitti's departure, King Agnitra, his lusty desires not at all satisfied, always thought of her. Therefore, in accordance with the Vedic injunctions, the king, after his death, was promoted to the same planet as his celestial wife. That planet, which is called Pitriloka, is where the Pitas, the forefathers, live in great delight. Purport. If one always thinks of something, he certainly gets a related body after death. Maharaj Agnitra was always thinking of Pitriloka, the place where his wife had returned. Therefore, after his death, he achieved that same planet, probably to live with her again. Bhagavad Gita also says, Yang vapi smaram bhavam tyachatyante kalevaram tantam evaiti kunteya sada tatbhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. Bhagavad Gita 8.6. We can naturally conclude that if we always think of Krishna or become fully Krishna conscious, we can be promoted to the planet of Goloka Vrindavan, where Krishna eternally lives. End of the purport. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakani Panscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanjana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishavanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarupescha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Srimati Pashyatale. After Purvachiti's departure, King Agnitra, his lusty desires not at all satisfied, always thought of her. Therefore, in accordance with the Vedic injunctions, the king, after his death, was promoted to the same planet as his celestial wife. That planet, which is called Pitriloka, is where the Pittas, the forefathers, live in great delight. Hare Krishna. So, we coming also to an end of this chapter. One more verse tomorrow, and then the chapter's complete. So here we hear how how King Agnitra, he, after Purvachiti left, he's still feeling lustful. He's hankering after her. I remember one time His Holiness Damodar Maharaj was here, and some devotee, asked him, Suri, he proposed that to get free from lusty desires, one has to experience the sense gratification. And then when one experiences, then one can give up after. However, we hear in this example, and also in Bhagavad Gita, we hear how that's not how it works. Krishna says in the 3rd chapter, Avritam jnanametena jnanino nityavairina kama rupena konteya dushpurena nalena cha. Dushpurena nalena cha. Dushpurena means never satisfied, and analena means fire. Lust he compares lust to fire, which, like when you put wood or you put gasoline on fire, it will not decrease, but it will increase. And we can see it here in King Agnidra's example, how he enjoyed like a madman, and now Purvachit is gone, but he's still feeling the desire. He's feeling a lot of desire. He's thinking of her constantly. So that's not the way to engage in sense gratification. Will not lead us to the point where we feel satisfied. Another proposal is that when one becomes old, then lust will decrease. And Srila Prabhupada, he gives the story of I wrote it down yesterday. He gives two times, two stories he tells. One he experienced himself, and one is about Birbal, the minister of Akbar. And Akbar one time asked Birbal, "What's your opinion on sex desire? Does it decrease at the end of one's life?" And Birbal told him, "No, it's not going to decrease, just due to old age." And Akbar didn't believe him. He thought, no, that's when one is old, one becomes free from, naturally more detached from lust. And then Birbal told him, okay, one day he came back and he said, "Please bring your daughter. We go to visit the place." And then they went with the daughter. And they went to a hospital. I think it was an old man who was about to die. And he said, "Now when we go inside, look very closely at his face and where he will watch." And they came in, and even though Akbar, the great emperor, came, the person who was lying on the deathbed, who knew he has to leave his body now, his life is finished, immediately looked at the daughter. And then Akbar understood, yeah, even an old man who is about to die, he's still full of lusty desires. And Srila Prabhupada himself told the story how he was in Paris and he saw how Prabhupada said 75-year-old men, they would pay $50 to go to the nightclub and pay more to enjoy the women. So that's not the way how to get free. We cannot just wait till we are old, because that could be our strategy. Okay, let me just enjoy, and at the same time, at one point, I'm sure, by the mercy of Krishna, when I'm old, it will be gone. That's not how it works. Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj wrote this book, Transforming Lust into Love, and he's giving basically this whole, in this title he explains that we have to transform it. And we know from Chaitanya Charitamrita that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains how lust is actually the perverted form of love. And in that sense, the love which we usually have for Krishna is then just projected on our body. And I love my body, that's why I want to satisfy my senses. So what do we speak about now? Just one thing yesterday came to mind because we had an interesting discussion on the table about, we were speaking, I missed the class of Christian and he was speaking about the glories of a mother. And you mentioned, that Prabhupada said, or Vallabha said, if a boy is breastfed by his mother for 6 years, then he will become a sannyasi. Who's Vallabha mentioned. We should find that quote. I don't know if it's if Prabhupada really said. But what came to my mind yesterday evening when I was just reading through, and somehow this topic came back, I once heard, and I also couldn't find any source for that if a child has ample opportunity to suck the breast of the mother in that early stage of life, the sex desire will be reduced. And why? Because we know how the tongue is connected to the genitals. And if that kind of sense is engaged in such a sattvic way, then naturally the child will develop some kind of natural satisfaction. So that came to mind. I just wanted to share, and I noted it down here. So it would be interesting to make some research about this topic. I googled it, but some other stuff came up, as you can imagine, so then I left it. Prabhupada he quotes this verse in the Bhagavad Gita, Yang Yang Vapi Smaram Bhavam, Tyachantam Te Kalevaram, Tantam Evaiti Kontya Sadatat Bhava Bhavita. That whatever one, the state of being, the bhav at the end of life, that's what's going to decide where the soul is heading in the next life. And in the just one verse after that, Krishna becomes more clear. He says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhyacha maya pita manobudir mam evaishyasi samshaya. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. And it's a short but very Sorry, actually I wanted to read the purport to this verse Prabhupada quoted, Yang Yang Vapi Smaram. It's very instructive. The process of changing one's nature at the critical moment of death is here explained. A person who at the end of his life quits his body, thinking of Krishna, attains the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. But it is not true that a person who thinks of something other than Krishna attains the same transcendental state. This is a point we should note very carefully. How can one die in the proper state of mind? Maharaj Bharat, although a great personality, thought of a deer at the end of his life, and so in the next life he was transferred into the body of a deer. Although as a deer he remembered his past activities, he had to accept that animal body. Of course, one's thoughts during the course of one's life accumulate to influence one's thoughts at the moment of death. So this life creates one's next life. If one's present life is one lives in a mode of goodness and always thinks of Krishna, it is possible for one to remember Krishna at the end of one's life. That will help one be transferred to the transcendental nature of Krishna. If one is transcendently absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be transcendental, spiritual, not material. Therefore the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare is the best process for successfully changing one's state of being at the end of one's life. Yeah, so clear point how we cannot expect to think of Krishna at the time of death when we don't think of him during our lifetime. So I just want to actually read some other quote to you because I found it very instructive, and we can hopefully maybe build up on this. I didn't find it. Sorry. I don't even remember. I've kind of a blackout now. In another purport in the 6th chapter, Srila Prabhupada says how the way how to remember Krishna at the time of death is by constantly chanting the Maha Mantra throughout one's life. And he quotes the verse Trinada Pisa Nichana, Terora Pisa Hishnana, Amanina Manadina Kirtanya Sadahrihi. And that's what really is the one, is, some say it's the most important verse in our whole philosophy, because it's really the essence of our practice. And there is one disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta, his name is Kapoor, I don't know his initiated name, and he tells that Prabhupada, when he lived in Allahabad, he was a pharmaceutical man, who used to make medicines, and this Kapoor met Srila Prabhupada in Allahabad, and he was not connected to Gaudiya Math at the time, Kapoor, but Prabhupada was, so he preached to him, and even though he was a Grihastha, we know Prabhupada was actually always focused on the instruction of his spiritual master. And they would meet regularly, and Prabhupada would make some medicine and give it to him. He was a professor at university, and tell him, this is a new medicine, so please you try it out. And one time he gave him a medicine for concentration. He said, please take it during the exam times at the university. And Kapoor said it was actually always very helpful, the medicine Prabhupada. And Kapoor one day went to Prabhupada and told Prabhupada, but Prabhupada, when will you give me the medicine you are taking? And Prabhupada asked, what do you mean? And he said, yeah, you always engaged in speaking about Krishna, you give so nice classes, you sing nice kirtan, and you have Krishna prema. So when will you give me the medicine for Krishna prema? And Prabhupada, this describes Prabhupada, became very humble. He said, I also couldn't find it yet. But when I have it, I will give it to you. Then a few days later he came and he told him, the medicine you were asking about the other day, I still didn't find it, but I know the recipe. And he said, Trinada Pisa Nichana, Terora Pisa Hishnana, Amanina Manadina Kirtanya Sadahrihi. And he said, and I'm going to spread this teaching all over the world. Kapoor remembered that this teaching I'm spread all over the world. So this verse, even though so simple, it gives a very deep meaning, and Mahaprabhu, he compares, or he gives the example of grass and the tree, which both are very insignificant entities in this world. So it's about humility and tolerance, and I thought I'm going to read something again from Bhagavad Gita, which speaks about humility, and which, again, when I read it, it really struck me. This is in the 13th chapter, the famous description of knowledge, Amanitam, Adambitam, Ahimsa, Kshanti, Rajarjavam, and Krishna outlines what means knowledge, and he starts with humility, Amanitam, Amanina, Manadina, Amanitam. And he describes what is humility, Prabhupada. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others, but from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge who knows that he is not this body, anything, honor or dishonor pertaining to this body is useless. One should not be hankering after this material deception. You know what I was remembering when I read this? There is one. Who has heard of Enneagram? You made a course with Krishna Damodar Prasad. You know, heard maybe about it. It's a Christian teaching of coming from the desert in the Middle East. They say that's where it originated from, and it's a teaching of analyzing personality types. And I was listening one time to, just recently actually, to one. He's a priest, a Christian priest, and he teaches that in a very traditional way. And it's 9 different personality types, and he explains about them. And one thing he said was that all these 9 personality types are strategies how the conditioned living entity tries to get adoration, appreciation. And he was saying that these conditionings, they often look very good from outside. Like, for example, there is one who always wants to do everything right. And if I do everything right, then I can be better than others because I'm doing it better. Or somebody always wants to help. You know, I'm always the helpful person. Or somebody is always the successful person, always the best in the classroom. And then he says, even though it looks good, actually it's evil. Because it doesn't have anything to do with humility, but it's actually pride. You want to establish yourself. You want to be the best. And he says that this teaching is trying to make you understand in Christian school that you have to see your own conditioning and how you always try to get attention and adoration from others. What Prabhupada just said, that's human tendency. We always want to be admired. It doesn't mean that just somebody who is, trying to be famous on the stage, but everybody is trying to get this kind of attention. And now I want to read to you the last paragraph in this purport. Beginning from practicing humility up to the point of realization of the Supreme Truth, the Absolute Personality of Godhead, this process is just like the staircase beginning from the ground floor and going up to the top floor. Now on this staircase there are so many people who have reached the first floor, the second or the third floor, etc. But unless one reaches the top floor, which is the understanding of Krishna, he is at a lower stage of knowledge. If anyone wants to compete with God and at the same time make advancement in spiritual knowledge, he will be frustrated. It is clearly stated that without humility, understanding is not truly possible. One should be humble and know that he is subordinate to the Supreme Lord. Due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, one becomes subordinate to material nature. One must know and be convinced of this truth. So if we think about this, if we cultivate devotional service, but we do it in this mood of trying to get something, then we running the risk that externally we might be engaged, but internally we're not really establishing that relationship. We're not cultivating love, and we're not actually thinking about Krishna. Bhaktisiddhanta was once asked how it is that so many in the mat, they are cultivating the Krishna consciousness, but then it is seen that they fall away and they are not really on a high level of Krishna consciousness. And his answer is that's because they have worms in their stomach. And whatever they eat is eaten by the worms. You know worms in the Bandwürmer, we say in German, Bandwürmer. And then he said, these worms, what are these worms? It's some desire for profit, personal profit. And illicit behavior. I think these two things he mentioned. So, going back to this point, Agnetara is thinking of his wife at the time of death, and in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says we can also think of him at the time of death, and then go to him, and that's actually our goal. But we have to practice Krishna consciousness properly, and the essence of that is to always chant the holy name, think of Krishna. And this is only possible if we are humble. And humility doesn't necessarily mean that I'm walking around with the head very low, but it means that I'm not amanitvam. Mana means to get attention. Amanitvam means I don't want attention. Fine. Good. And Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita how lust can be very subtle. He says it can be like the womb covering the embryo, it can be like the dust covering the mirror, but it can also be like the smoke covering the fire. So he's saying that this lust is can be very subtle, so we have to be careful. So that's what came to mind, what I wanted to share, what was inspiring me. And one example that came is a few examples came to mind. One is the Brahmanas in Vrindavan, the big Pandit Brahmanas, who were worshipped like the head of society. And then when the big test came, it was shown that they're actually not Krishna conscious at all. Krishna and the cowherd boys, they went to the forest, and then Krishna, he sent his friends to the Brahmanas and told them, please ask them to send us some food. And the Brahmanas, they are externally, it looks like they're super Krishna conscious. They do sacrifice, they're very pakka, they know the scriptures. But then when the test came, they were not willing to serve the Lord. And that's what Prabhupada says in the purport of this Amanita Madambitam verse, how if this humility is not cultivated properly, maybe externally the other things come, but it will be like empty. It will not have a true meaning. On the other hand, the wives of the Brahmanas, the gopis, not gopis, but the Brahmanis, they were Krishna conscious, even though they might have been more simple. Another example is the Brahmana who asks Narada Muni to go to Vaikuntha, if he can ask when he will get the privilege to go back to him, and then the cobbler also asks. And when Narada Muni tells him that you still need one more life, he becomes very upset. And the other one, the cobbler, a very simple person, hearing that he will actually reach the Lord at some point, he becomes very ecstatic. Jai Jai Prabhupada So in that sense, again, the humility is lacking to a great extent, and that's why there is an obstacle. And the third example that came was Maharaj Purvasa Muni was very renounced and meditating on the Supreme all the time, but then when he met Maharaj Ambarish, he was exposed as not so Krishna conscious and very proud, actually, not humble at all. And it's a complex topic, that's why Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj wrote a whole book on it. And if you look in his book, he speaks about so many aspects of how lust and love can manifest. And we spoke about chanting, how we should always chant, and amanitvam, we should be humble. And Prabhupada also says that these qualities have to be consciously developed within us. He said, no, we have to take one step after the other. And that is done if we follow the process properly. And Amanitam is the first step. So what's the injunction of scripture, how we can cultivate our humility? What is a great step towards becoming more humble?
Guru Padashraya? Yes,
that's the first step. If we submit ourselves to a qualified person, then we show, somebody's greater than me and I don't know much, I'm actually nonsense. And if we don't do that properly, then everything else will be ein Folgefehler. How is it in English? A Folgefehler means in the maths, if you make a mistake here and then you continue calculating later on, you will see it's still too short or too much. Some mistake will be there because maybe 10, 11, 12, 13 steps before I did a mistake, and now it will show later on. And Prabhupada made that point again in the purport. Without humility, it's not good. So please bless me that I can become a humble servant. And if you have any comments or questions, then give some time. Yes?
Just you. Можешь перевести? В разных йоговских традициях есть специальные упражнения, которые помогают трансформировать сексуальную энергию, поднимать ее выше.
Exist some special exercise that help to make this sexual desire like up in chakras.
То есть йоги знали, что поднимая сексуальную энергию вверх, они получают мистические способности и могут превратиться в сверхчеловека. То есть у них там другая мотивация была, но то есть они разрабатывали эти упражнения для подъема специальной сексуальной энергии.
Yogi know how to transform this sexual desire and how to overcome this desire.
Я не слышала, чтобы в Исконе кто-то использовал эти упражнения. Ведь брахмачари очень сложно соблюдать, когда вокруг там на улице много полуголых женщин. А это как бы упражнения, которые могут помочь. Я не слышала, чтобы здесь кто-то были знания об этом.
She says that she doesn't know if any brahmacharis, for example, follow this exercise because it's difficult to stay brahmachari when, for example, we go on the streets and here's a lot of women and everything. And
вопрос, я не слышала, чтобы в Исконе были такие упражнения или были эти знания, чтобы кто-то ими пользовался.
So question is it needed to use these exercises in a ISKCON or not? Or maybe somebody use it or not?
There, you're speaking about mechanical yoga process where you transform your sexual energy, desire. Prabhupada didn't give us anything about that. And from a philosophical point of view, it's enough. And not only enough, it's the only way to develop love for Krishna. Then we can actually overcome or we transform sex desire. I remember one time one devotee brahmachari told me he had some difficulties. Actually, another brahmachari was a long time brahmachari. He all of a sudden changed, and then another brahmachari told me that he asked this brahmachari while he was still in saffron, while he was having difficulties just a few weeks or months before. And then this devotee, who later changed, he told him, yeah, do some pranayama. That was his advice. And he was a brahmachari when he gave the advice, and a few weeks later he changed his ashram. And it's not a fall down to change the ashram at all, but what I thought was that the advice is not really... He was not successful in the sense that if he wanted to stay brahmachari and then he felt, no, I have sex desire, I should get married. And so that's not the way, the mechanical way. And so the love for Krishna, but before we love Krishna, we have the love for the Guru. That's our process. If we love our spiritual master, we can overcome sex desire, because to please him, to follow his instructions, we can tolerate and then cultivate, we practice our Krishna consciousness and we develop our attachment to Krishna through him. That's more recommended. But then we can do whatever helps. Like if it helps us to do some pranayama or some yoga, it's okay. In Krishna book it's explained how Krishna Balaram went to the Gurukul. Then they learned the 64 arts, and one of the arts is to manipulate minds. And Prabhupada then explains that this is the same technique to control one's own mind, and how a brahmachari can subdue sex desire. So Krishna learned some kind of technique, how we can subdue sex desire. I asked Ajitananda Prabhu if he has any idea what could be the technique, and he spontaneously told me the technique he knows is that to overcome a desire you should focus your mind on a bigger desire. So, for example, I have a desire to make a career, but then this desire comes and I think, yeah, but my Guru Maharaj wanted me to make a career in ISKCON. So this is much more important to me, so then I can give up the other desire and I can divert my mind just in a way, in a strategical point. In a strategical way I take something else and push it out. Prabhupada also says, not Prabhupada, but Krishna says that when one is like the ocean, full, then even though the desires come, I'm always full, I will not be agitated by the desires coming. The ocean and the rivers flowing into the ocean. The ocean is always steady thing. And if one is satisfied in Krishna consciousness, in the service, and then there is actually no, even though the rivers come, they flow, we don't feel like doing anything. And Prabhupada confirmed, he said, I'm not free of sex desire, but I don't have time for this. Is it okay? Rokapani actually had something.
I heard one brahmachari, but he's a senior brahmachari, he said that he was chanting with my spiritual master, and then, I don't know, I guess he had some thoughts, and my spiritual master, through Paramatma, knew it, and then he said, like if you want to get rid of a sexual desire, you should look at Krishna's eyebrows, because actually there is somewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam where Srila Prabhupada explains this, that if you look at Krishna's eyebrows, then all the lust and sexual desire goes away, because Krishna does something. I forgot what exactly, but that's good to know. And he did that. So he was very happy, felt safe and saved.
Thank you so much for your class. I have one comment and one question. when you were mentioning that actually if a child is breastfed till 6 years old, my brother came to mind because actually
My brother also. He will become Spaniards. My brother too. But he will not
so he was actually breastfed till 5, and he has a really strong sense control over his tongue, like really strong, and also that if he's determined or something, no one can stop him, and also that he's really detached. He just has like all his stuff sits in a suitcase. So
This is
my younger brother,
his name?
Nalata.
Nada.
Yeah, and I just found it funny. I don't know about your experience about that.
My brother is an artist and he wakes up every day at 5 and all he does is paint. He's not so spiritual, he's very philosophical, and yeah, but you can see some things a little bit strange. And he doesn't think about anything about except like painting. That's what he does all day, like in his atelier. And so
And he's not a
he
devotee.
no, he's not a devotee. He reads everything, like all the philosophy, and he read the Vedas and everything. But he's too intellectual at the moment. But you can see that, yeah, he's a little bit weird when you compare him to other people, but in a good way. Like,
He sounds like self-satisfied in a way.
yeah, and he also doesn't need much. So I don't know.
We had a really interesting discussion yesterday about this topic. We were churning it. Because then we will say everything next time he gives class. Yeah.
Yeah, and my question was related to the point that you were mentioning how lust is actually very subtle, and to become humble actually means to not have the desire to be seen or to be recognized as something special. And once I read the statement that actually Achitananda Prabhu was saying that a woman usually wants to be seen and a man is seer. And then also it is stated that actually women are sometimes 7 times more lusty than men or something like that. And I just thought that maybe this lust is then very subtle, like that she wants to be seen. And in this nature, this lust comes out. Or what is your opinion on that? In that way, or doesn't it relate to it?
Yeah, this the seer and the seen, this is the masculine and feminine principle we see all over creation. And the woman wants to be seen, and the child again wants to be seen by her parents. You saw children, how they sometimes do so. Sometimes you see girls, they do some dancing, and they really want to get your attention. Boys also, they bring something and show it to you because they want to be seen. So it's the feminine principle of enjoying in this world, and the masculine is to enjoy the feminine principle. But we all have it. Men also want to be seen, but maybe instead of women I'm speaking stereotype, they want to be seen for their physical beauty. If you go to the lake, what do we see? Women, they're showing their breasts, they're showing their butt. And it's quite obvious, that what they want to achieve by that. They want to get the attention of men. And that's giving them pleasure. That's enjoyment. If I'm seen by others, I'm enjoying. So men also start to do that, and but usually they have less opportunity because they don't have such a beautiful body, and women usually they are less interested in that kind of aspect. But men might do it in a different way by by giving good classes, by leading nice kirtans, and whatever. So then I also can attract the attention. Now your question about the 7 times more lustful, I don't know. And I don't want to speculate.
It's the subtle thing.
It's a subtle thing that I also heard, and men, they actually usually have more sex desire in a gross way. But women,
They need family, house, security, in that sense. So in that sense manifests lust, yeah, because you are more attached to materials. It's difficult for you to, for example, go to the forest and live with nothing. For women it's more difficult than for men because they just have that kind of nature. Which doesn't mean that they can not overcome it, but that's what I analyzed through reading and through observing the world also.
but then according to this, what I was speaking about is something very, very subtle. You know, that how we try to attract attention. Somebody can be very in the background and always helping, but that person is just dying to get appreciation from the person's.
Yeah,
He or
I
she
see
says.
that in myself so much. Like, if we don't think about it, we are not aware of it, but actually it is like that. And probably it's so much to do with the identification of the others. And it probably comes out in different ways.
Yeah, we have just a natural tendency for love and appreciation and attention, and when we don't have it in a spiritual sense, we'll get it in some kind of material sense, and that can be very gross, very subtle. And this enneagram shows many, many, many stages how this can manifest, and it also tries to explain how we can purify it. Yeah, probably.
That actually was what I was going to comment what you just said. It reminded me of when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur instructed, try to be seen by Krishna.
Yeah.
So that's actually recommended. Try to
Yeah.
act in a way that Krishna will see you. That's the way to dovetail it.
And that's really the point which is amazing in Enneagram, that he makes very clearly that you cannot not act on your condition. He says that. But you can purify it. In a similar way, like Bhagavad Gita, you have your condition, but you engage in Krishna's service. So, when one has this conditioning of, I'm just the people pleaser, the one who helps everyone, it's not that I reject it, but I purify it. So internally I start to change. How do I use this? Now I don't use it to get the attention and the praise and the gratitude, but I do it still I do it to serve, and I become more attention.
I just had a comment about your question about the lust and women being more lusty. And I was thinking of how lust, just as we discussed, just doesn't mean sex desire. Lust is a manifold thing, many things. And if you look at the Shastra, actually, you could say in a way being a woman is quite a responsibility. Because if you look at the quotation of the Shastra says that if the woman is unchaste or impure, the entire family and dynasty is destroyed. And also if you look at the feminine energy, it's quite a potent energy, it's very powerful. And therefore, I think the injunctions of the Shastra are also posing responsibility. So for example, something like women being more lusty, etc. when it's made, of course we can also understand it in the gross sense, that because they have attachment to this, attachment to that. But if you really look at the inner meaning of the Shastra, it is to realize that women, because of the prowess, the power they've been given in terms of beauty, in terms of emotional integrity, in terms of also capacity to manipulate, it's very strong. And therefore, when these statements are made in the Shastra, it's also imperative that a person who's willing to learn from the Shastra takes this advantage and learns that, then one has to be very careful in use of power and energy. And the same is also not just for women, actually, even for the king. It is said the king is, is capable of this, capable of that. And why? Because it's a very responsible position. So even women, it is said, when they have, for example, they have the capacity to be a mother, etc. You see, so women have been given quite some power actually in Krishna's energies. And therefore, it's quite a responsibility also. And therefore, when these statements are made, it's not to be discouraged or to be perplexed, but to understand as a Vaishnavi ourselves that it is actually an opportunity to be very responsible of how we portray ourselves, how we conduct ourselves. So that's just some thoughts I had.
Yeah, I was also thinking how is it, because we hear that, also what we usually hear is that man is more lost than women, but in a gross sense, but what does it mean? And that's very important to see that it's actually just the potential. But when we also see that lust and love is like at the opposite end.
Yeah, like up and down.
Yeah.
Perversion.
We can also think that actually, if we are selfish, then we're very lusty. But if we love Krishna, then it's like, then the true love is coming about, and then we also see that actually the gopis have much more love for Krishna. So we have to transform that.
This reminds me, one thing my Guru Maharaj used to say, the difference between love and lust is, in lust, you are in the center, and in love, Krishna is in the center. That's the only difference. So because if you see, the gopis are very feminine, so it's not a problem being a woman or being feminine. It's about the use of the feminine energy, actually, which is quite a responsibility.
We are all feminine, actually.
Yes.
And you see our spiritual masters in front of their spiritual master, they're most feminine. Okay, thank you all very much for attendance. Have a nice day. Grantara Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Granta Koti Vaishnava ki jai.
off the light a minute. You need it. You need it.
Can you switch it up and I see?
Oh.
It's fine. It's okay.